Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets, in case you're wondering, love to win. 6 out of 7 with the latest coming over the Philadelphia 76ers. We take a look at the game, D'Angelo Russell and his future. And hey, why not? Even the play-in tournament? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and also let you know that today's episode is brought to you by me and by Doug. That's what we're here for, guys. We dive into the Brooklyn Nets, Doug, who keep winning over the 76ers this time, and whether or not we have to maybe start to talk about over these final 28 games now that Jordi Fernandez has an agenda, and it's about proving the entire league, the fan base, the organization wrong. There's nothing we can do about it to stop him.
I mean, at this point, is Jordi Fernandez a Coach of the Year candidate?
Put his name in the hat and put him close to the top.
It's not going to happen, but like when you're this far above your win expectation with a team that like nobody thought had any chance of winning. Now, to everyone's credit, they also thought they were going to do the right things and, maybe try to lose some of these games to get better seeding. So, process over results or whatever ends up being. But just another game where the Nets don't score, but somehow the other team scores even less.
That's right.
And now they have another win under their belt. They've won, I think, 5 of their last 6. Is that right? 6 of the last 7?
6 of the last 7.
Sorry, 6 of the last 7 they've won now. Along the way, a lot of like lucky things, lucky in quotes, have happened for them where other teams sort of like best players either don't play or, get hurt in the middle of the game. This one, they come in, no Joel Embiid, no Tyrese Maxey. Paul George looks like an absolute corpse. And now they've won. I mean, they're 2 games out of the play-in. The 2 games out of the play-in. Like, how is this? How are we even here? 1 game out of the loss column in the play-in. Like, this is so insane. We'll talk about the game, and there's a couple of themes that I've run throughout this last 7 games, these last 6 wins. But just on a high level, I feel like how many times have we come in here now, and it's like we open the show and we're kind of like, what's going on here? It just doesn't nothing makes any sense.
And there is the part of it because you mentioned there. So we had a few episodes recently where you have had to, Doug Norrie, take the brunt of, hey, if I'm wrong, I'll be wrong, right? The Ben Simmons things, etc. And we typically, because we're usually aligned on a lot of this stuff, we kind of take the blame together. I came into this, and now I'm holding my breath a little bit here, saying that the Brooklyn Nets over the next 15 games, and I said this 2 games ago, so that's 2 wins ago for anyone that hasn't been paying attention, that the Brooklyn Nets are going to, over the next 15 games, probably have an over-under win total of 5.5. The hard part is what you mentioned, though. No Joel Embiid, no Tyrese Maxey, you get that win. The Hornets, they pull ball at the end of that game, and the Nets are already in hand in that one as well. Anyway, they're going to win that game. The hard part that I'm having right now is the what's going on here question might not matter in another 4 or 5 games, right? Because Brooklyn is going to take on the Cavs. Now, they will get the 76ers again, so that's probably a win. And Washington, another very winnable game. They're in full tank. But Oklahoma City, I'm almost eating my own.
I was going to say, buddy, where do you think you're going? I was going to ask where you're going.
Where am I going here? Because then I get to Portland and even Detroit, who's 5-5. I just put out pivot. I put out how the Brooklyn Nets are the only. There's only 4 other teams in the Eastern Conference that have a winning record over the last 10 games, and the Brooklyn Nets are the 5th team. They're 6-4 over the last 10, won 6 out of their last 7. The other 4 teams are the top 4 seeds in the Eastern Conference. And when you go to that schedule, because I had thought that Philadelphia was going to be one of those teams because they need to win. The injuries have plagued them all year. Would be a couple of losses. After Cleveland, it's the Philly and Washington game, as I mentioned. OKC, okay. But then it's Portland. Now, Detroit is still a good team. San Antonio's trying to figure things out. Golden State. You still get Charlotte mixed in there. Maybe we are going to turn around in 15 games, and they're going to be a team, even if they ended up going 6-9 in those 15 games. Even if they go 7-8, whatever it is, I'm still going to turn around and go, well, this is different than what I was anticipating because I said 5.5 over under win total. And I thought I'll have a bit of a chuckle when they win 3, right? It wasn't like I thought this is a battle to 6 or 7 wins. It's going to impact them. And as you say, these are two teams in Philadelphia and Brooklyn that were right there in terms of the tank odds as well. They're now even with one another, 20 wins apiece, 34 losses.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we've come onto the show multiple times and sort of like been like this, where it's like it doesn't make any sense. That you look at
Where I thought I had a point, and then I completely got
before. And I'll give you I'll take your side on this one. When you look at that schedule under like the old mindset paradigm around how this team is supposed to perform, that does look like a lot of losses. But then when you go through this new lens, all of a sudden you stumble upon the Detroits of the world and you're like, I don't know, like the Portlands of the world. And you're thinking, well, I'm not sure, like, but it's even because those teams, I mean, Detroit's been fine this year, right? Like Detroit, they're 29 and 26. Like they're like a good team this year. I mean, the Blazers are 23 and 32. In the way that we thought about this season, the Blazers' 23 wins would have been likely considerably better, where the expectation right now during the season, where the Nets were probably projected to have like 13 wins or something like that. And we would have looked at the 23 and been like, they're a decent team. They got some younger guys, they're 10 wins above this team. But now the Nets have more wins. Was that right? Wait, did the Nets have more wins?
No.
Yeah. Oh, still, it doesn't matter. We'll just, I know I'm wrong, but whatever. We'll pretend like I'm right. This is where
now the Nets have 7 more wins than you thought they would right now. And so now when you look at that game, it feels different, right? That's what it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what throws you off. That's like that's where the circle doesn't square, right? Because it's like, you just can't really shift it's very hard to shift our minds into like expectations over outcomes. The outcomes have been so insane on a nightly basis that now I think, I mean, Nets fans, us included, you're just resigned to the idea that this team is going to stay in games. And I will say, over these last 6 wins, a couple of them were good ones, right? Oh, they're all good ones, but a couple of them were up against other teams, sort of full strength squads. A lot of them were just, Miami was down guys in that game. Houston was down Van Vliet in one of these games. Charlotte stinks.
I don't think they had Sengun in one of those either for Houston, if I'm not mistaken.
And hilarious, yeah, they did have that, right? Sengun didn't play one of those, and then hilariously to get the loss to Washington in there somehow is like that's the other part where none of it makes sense. Where when you just slam it, when you slam a 17-point loss to Washington, that's one of that made their 9th win of the year. Like it just you just can't. Your eyes roll all the way in the back of your head. Like what can you do? It's just so insane.
And that's the perfection of it. The Nets winning this game 100-96 over the 76ers. We'll get to the box score here, but that's the perfection of it. It's why you come on to episodes like this, Doug and myself, and go, yeah, well, if you look at the schedule, they'll probably have losses, although they beat some of these good teams. Yeah, but remember that Washington game? Like at that point, it didn't matter. They were not going to catch Washington. Why not make a big statement against that team? No, that'll be one of the ugliest losses that they've had in recent games. And then we'll go ahead and reset ourselves and think about Miami, think about Charlotte, think about Philadelphia. Coming up here in a second, inside of this game, there was a pretty good performance from one D'Angelo Russell and a few others for the Brooklyn Nets. We'll talk about that, and I'll pose the question. Is D'Angelo Russell a crafty veteran for the future in the Brooklyn Nets? We'll get into that in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. Look, it's after the holiday hustle. Nothing like giving your home a little TLC. Always find that decluttering, refreshing the space helps you get back into a routine, whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year. Wayfair is everything you need, all within your budget. I'm currently right now looking for a chair to go right behind me. It's got very specific stuff because it's got to be. I want to be able to lay down in it. Like if I want to just move off the office chair and just kind of like take a little break, something like that. Maybe get off the podcast episode and just maybe lay down. I'm gonna need it's gonna be have to do that. It's also got to be affordable. And it's also got to have a certain style that my wife doesn't always approve of. So that's going to be a lot of different check boxes. I know I'm going to get there with Wayfair. Affordable, free, hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items, which this is going to be. There's something for everyone in every style of home. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals. Get your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the Brooklyn Nets, talking about the 196 win over the Philadelphia 76ers, and just where should we set our expectations in the short and even the long term. I want to get into the box score and D'Angelo Russell. I'll just mention one other thing is in the 196 win here, the Nets have only averaged across the last now 6-7 games total here. They've only averaged 102 points per game.
Well,
so
yeah.
There's one side of this where, and this is the other part that perplexes you when you come on to do the shows. You want to say, well, they didn't have this player, they didn't have that player, all that good stuff. But there is also, as we talked about last episode, something just to how good the defense has been able to play.
Yeah.
Even Philadelphia, I get without Maxey and Joel Embiid. And this is something that we've talked about needing to adjust how we look at this roster and what they're capable of. But to me, it keeps coming back to scheming and coaching and situational basketball, where the Nets and Jordi Fernandez have been able to win these games in the margin. Because last night, as the example, even without those players, Philadelphia desperately needs to win these games. They're conveying that first round pick to OKC. So they have no reason to lose this, even if they are shorthanded. And that comes down to me, it's like, hey, what's the difference maker here? It's been Jordi Fernandez and the coaching staff for the Brooklyn Nets, and that mattered in a big way last night against the 76ers, where D'Angelo Russell gave you a lovely 22-point performance. Want to make sure that I get his shooting numbers down here correctly. 9 of 15, 3 of 7 from deep, threw in another 4 assists to balance out his 4 turnovers, as also had 1 steal in there as well. What did you like about his game last night specifically, before we talk about some other guys, including Day'Ron off the bench?
Well, before we go to that, I want to just piggyback on one of your points right there about
Please.
the number of points scored in the game. Here, want to hear a wild stat?
Please.
Over the last 7, Nets are 7. Nets are 6 and 7 in their last 7. In that time, where do you think they rank in points scored per game in the NBA? They've won 6 out of the last 7 games. Over those last 7 games, where
28.
do you think? Dead last.
I want to be a little bit, Yeah, I love it. I love it. Perfection.
They've scored the least amount of points in the NBA in that stretch.
No notes.
And yet they've won 6 of the last 7. That is insane. It's just insane. It shouldn't happen. That should not happen. They're tied with the Charlotte Hornets, 102 points per game in that stretch, and they've won. And by the way, these the bottom 3 teams, you might as well have said 28th, because 28th and 29th are basically tied, and then there's a 3-point difference up to the 27th team. So they're way behind some of these other teams, basically the rest of the NBA. These 3 groups, those other teams can't win any games in that stretch. The Nets have won 6 of their last 7.
Now, how many points where do they rank in points given up per game over those last 7 games, Doug? I bet they're number 1 in the league and number 1 in your hearts, as we think about
I didn't have
this.
that right in front of me. Anyway, I'll get that here in a second. But we do know that the defense. I do know over the last 10 games, I had this pulled up, so I'll do it this way. Over the last 10 games, the defensive rating has been 6th in the league. But actually, I'll just go to the 7th real quick. This is good podcasting. Good call. Over the last 7 games, the defensive rating is, so it's not points per game, but whatever, it's close enough, is 103.4. So they're easily first in defensive rating over the last 7. So yeah, I mean, of course, if you're going to score the least amount of points in basketball and win 6 games, it doesn't take a huge leap to figure out where they're going to be defensively, because it just means the other teams can't score at all. So there's been some context in there. We'll talk about D'Lo in a second. There's been some context in here around who some of these other teams were bringing to the court. But still, I mean, these are all still NBA teams. And to just have a run like this where you can't score at all should be just auto losses, right? And they just gone the other way. So I just thought those stats were kind of fascinating.
No, I keep coming back to it. I think it was 43% there for the Philadelphia 76ers in this game. They shot under 25% from 3. Nets didn't shoot well from 3 either in this game too. You go back to that Charlotte game where it was 41%. So I am to illustrate, how do you hold teams down? And by the way, I think the Nets and the defensive effort has been a big factor in this. Charlotte shot 41% from the field. They shot under 20% from beyond the arc on 31 attempts. So, these comparative box scores, right? And then you have to probably go the layer deeper and say, well, let's talk about the players and what their percentages are and whether or not that contributes to it. I still think it does come down to a lot of the scheme and what the Nets have wanted to do defensively. 35% from the field, 30% from beyond the arc in the game against the Miami Heat as well. So it's not like the other team has been shooting the lights out. This is like chicken or the egg territory. Is it because they have injuries and they don't have their best roster out there and they're shooting poorly and that helps the Nets defense look better? Or is it the defense that is really starting to stifle other teams? And maybe, the one thing that we've talked about, Jordi Fernandez getting this team to play well, I always dismiss this, I think, typically, but getting through the trade deadline and having it be that Cam Johnson's going to be here, not going anywhere, getting through the buyout of Ben Simmons and knowing that that's done, and over with, knowing that this is the team, I do think that there's something there from a player standpoint, certainly, where they go, okay, this is the roster. I'm here now. I don't have to worry about looking over my shoulder for trades or getting cut or anything like that. I think there's probably a little bit of weight to that in how much extra 5% of buy-in to what Jordi Fernandez wants you to do on a night in, night out basis. Maybe that's the difference of helping you move across the line when we look at a game like this against Philadelphia.
And you have guys like D'Lo, just to wrap it back to what you asked before, you have guys like D'Lo who are just professional guys, who are good players, who could have helped the playoff team. He wouldn't have been like a starter or anything, but would have helped one of these other teams. Like probably what they needed, honestly, the deadline. We talked about him going to the Magic, and they probably could have really used a guy like him, right? Or even some of these other teams that could use like a primary ball handler off the bench that can run pick and roll with one of your bigs. Like we threw out OKC. I mean, they were never going to do it, but some of these other teams that could just use another guy, right, to just spell their person, be a little bit of injury protection, and know that you can run just sort of traditional pick and roll basketball, shoot the three, good floor organizer and stuff like that. And this is why exactly last night was a good example. Like why fans kind of were ripping their hair out at the time when they're like, why are we trading for this guy? This is like not the guy you bring in when you want to tank. Like you don't trade Dennis Schroeder and then go trade for D'Lo if you're trying to lose some games here to make sure, because he's just going to not do that. He's going to floor raise everyone. He got a bad rap because the contract was too much when he first signed it with Minnesota.
Yep.
And he didn't get along with the Lakers scheme with LeBron. So it gave him a bad rap about like who he was as a player. But we said at the time, we're like, this is not a bad player. This is not a bad player. Like it's just like, and he's gone the opposite way. I mean, like real quick, talk about unlocking bigs. What do you think his stats? He's played 104 minutes. You want to take a quick guess of the net rating with him and Daron Sharp on the court? Like the exact guy that would play well with him. Big screen setter, rim runner. I mean, Daron's done a good job here on the offensive glass, like to kind of clean some of this up. But like, real quick, net rating. That's the hard one.
Plus, let's do plus 13.
Plus 21. Plus 21,
118, and I would have felt better about it.
It's a hard number. Sometimes that rating is a hard one to get, like to kind of guess where you're going with the sample size. Those guys are plus 21.
Well, no, you know what the hard part was? Sorry, real quick. The hard part was they're only winning games by 1 or 2 points. How big can this sample be over 100 minutes? But that's how, by the way, that tells you a little something about maybe what D'Angelo Russell and Daron Sharp together are making up for on the, when it comes to what you need to get across the line in some of these games. I 100% agree with you. And this is the funny thing. So 2 things real quick here. And then we'll talk about bench. Some other players. Trendon Watford had a really good game. One, we all should have maybe known that something was awry when the Nets, as you mentioned, got rid of Dennis Schroeder, but then also brought in D'Angelo Russell, because they didn't just get rid of the veteran ball handler that has a skill set on the offense that you really need and say, well, we'll see what happens. We'll play some young guys. Well, I don't know. Maybe Thomas will come back. Whatever. Instead, they went and got this veteran. And the second part of it that we'll leave for a cliffhanger for our third segment is, should the Nets consider wanting D'Angelo Russell to be a part of this team beyond this year? Because you bought out Ben Simmons and he's gone now. From a ball handling perspective, you're still going to need somebody on this team. Whether or not D'Lo would want to be a part of that is a whole other question. We'll get into that. Plus, other standouts from the 76ers game here in just one moment. All right. Tying a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the 196 win over the Philadelphia 76ers, the fact the Brooklyn Nets are both tied for 6th in Tankathon odds and also just 2 games out of the play-in tournament. Friday, we could do a whole thing for Friday's episode about if we think this team's going to end up making the play-in tournament and what that would mean and how the fan base would react. But would you consider, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, would you want, you, Doug Norrie, D'Angelo Russell back, even as this team rebuilds and reconstructs and all those things? I mean, barring getting, a point guard in the draft that you really like and think is going to be a part of the core going forward, would you want to have a veteran like this on your roster?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk. Maybe we save this one for tomorrow's episode, because that one could be that one could be its own. This one could. We'll stay in the game here for a second. We'll say we'll go into the little D'Lo territory, because it is going to be fascinating. Just one little note on that note. It'll be fascinating to sort of how the Nets view him and how they view free agency this year, because they're going to have money to spend. Yeah, and I do wonder if everyone this is just his own episode. This is like the perfect situation for him. Like if you're him, right?
And a little bit of money, doesn't really care because they have it 2-3 years, not a problem. Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, man. Okay, we'll do this we'll do that as our own episode. That one's too good. I don't want to just jam that into the last 10 minutes here, because especially when we have other stuff to talk about. In the game, though, go ahead.
The other one was that I wanted to get to here. So a couple guys. One, let's talk about the player that has performed very well with D'Angelo Russell in tandem. And I want to get to Trendon Watford, but Day'Ron Sharpe, only 15 minutes. So you keep asking these questions about what's his role, even in the fourth head coach that he's played under now at this point. But 15 minutes, 4 of 6, 9 rebounds, because that's what he does. Also had 2 assists and a steal, 8 points plus 13 in his just 15 minutes on the court. Another really good performance from him. And then it's Trendon Watford for me, who didn't take a 3-point shot in this game. And the absence of Joel Embiid, right? Obviously a different defense that you're taking on in the 76ers without him. But in 24 minutes, 7 of 8. And this is where I think that we've missed Trendon Watford all year long with the injuries. His athleticism, couple assists, 3 steals, a block, 18 points off the bench. It's just such a reminder, man. Like, absence in sports does not make the heart grow fonder. Absence makes you forget. And then they come back and you go, oh, that's right. Like, we were really excited about him coming into the year and getting an expanded role.
Yeah. And the big story, we probably kind of buried it a little bit. The big story with this last stretch of wins too has been the bench. The bench has played really well. Like, Sharpe has played really well. Watford's played really well. Watford effectively played backup point guard in this game. And not even effectively. He just did play backup point guard in this game. And the bench units have just taken the other team's second units to task to some degree. Based a lot of these two guys, Tosan's played really well in this stretch also. And they just schematically are able to kind of come in and do a lot of the same things that the starters are going to do. Because if you look at the plus minus from this game, and it was obvious when you just watched, like, Keon Johnson -6, Nick Claxton a -1 again, like, still has the worst plus minus in defense, or excuse me, net rating on the team this year. Oh no, sorry, Clowney's slightly worse, but he's kind of hasn't played in a while. I mean, Claxton continues to play. I mean, I know in 13 and 10, he continues to play like sort of like negative basketball during the stretch. It's just Sharpe comes in and just has an insane plus minus, and they just win all these minutes, and they've won the Watford. I'm pretty sure they've won the Watford minutes too. And so overall, these guys just coming. Watford has a plus. Yeah, Sharpe has the best net rating on the team at 3.3, and Watford has the second best net rating on the team. They're the only two guys that are above 0. Russell D'Lo is 0, like, just completely even over this last stretch. Oh no, excuse me, over the whole season, and everyone else is like an easy negative. Right. And so it's these guys come in, they play really well off the bench every single game, and the Nets just end up winning. And then the starters kind of just like tread water a little bit, and they end up winning. I mean, that has been also the theme to hilariously have these guys, Watford and Sharpe, be the only 2+ players on the team this season. Yeah. And then D'Lo, and then it's Tosan at like a -0.1. So he's basically even too. And then everyone else is essentially -3 or below. Or basically almost -4 and below. So all the other guys that basically get blitzed, and then the bench comes in, and it's like, we got you,
mops it up,
and they keep it close. No, they keep it close. Yeah. And then they're able to kind of win in the end. It's just kind of been a theme this year.
And it's funny too, because it makes you think of how we talked about this in so many different iterations of this team. We talked about it when it was Mikal Bridges on this roster, and saying, well, any given night that they go out there, are they going to have the best first, second, or maybe even third player on the court? No. But when you get down to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, maybe there's more nets on that ledger, and that's what helps you sometimes win in these margins. I think it's still kind of it feels like over this last stretch, it's very much the same theme. It's now in this particular game with no Maxey and no Joel Embiid, you look at it a little bit differently. But in general, you'd say, yeah, when Trendon Watford comes in, Jalen Wilson is certainly cooled off over the last stretch of the season. Hasn't been the same type of player that we maybe saw early in the year. But when you bring him in, and you can bring in a player like Day'Ron Sharpe, it is like, hey, we're going to go win some minutes for you. And that might be the difference here. If you're playing defense and you can have some, quality moments here and there. I think it was D'Angelo Russell who had one like off balance, leaning chuck of a heave of a 3 last night. We're like, and then that one goes in, and that'll go ahead and help illustrate kind of where they've been here. It's kind of every element of this, man. It's a couple of bench players playing really well. It's the team being coached effectively by Jordi Fernandez. And then, like you said, it's catching some breaks with injuries for other rosters. It's having shots, maybe the extra 6% of the time, go down in critical moments that normally haven't, right? And that's where you end up looking back and going, hey, you've won 6 of 7, some bad teams on the list. And guess what? I did it earlier in the show. When you look at the schedule, you go, but that's what the NBA schedule is. Sometimes there's just bad teams on your schedule, and they're going to have more of them coming up here. So you can't just blink and say, don't worry about it, they'll be 3-7 over the next, in the next 10. No, it's going to be hard to see that for them, at least with the way that they've been playing right now.
And by the way, and just we talk every episode about this, and we will. It's already also like if you were just shooting for those highest percentage chances of guys like Flag or whatever, it's already damage done. That is just gone. It's like they're just not going to be able to. It's over. Like it's not over.
7 wins over Utah, 7 wins over Charlotte right now in the 4th spot. 5th seed, 17 wins for Toronto. I mean that's.
I actually don't even think we need to talk too much about it. Yeah, no, I don't think we need to talk about that too much anymore. I think it's like that. That's just well past. They're not going to get back there. Yeah, everyone's gonna say, well, it's there's a 14% and 9%. When you talk about generational talent, those percentages matter. Like that definitely matters. You would much rather have a 5% chance at $100 million than everyone would work extra hard for 5% more chance at a huge number of money. This is where like people get like the percentage piece of it wrong. It's not just percentage chance of like, me eating a banana or me eating an apple for breakfast. It's like, it's the difference of having where it's like, okay, it doesn't matter. 5, who cares? 14%, 9, who cares? Right. But when you're talking about a massive like life, put it through the context of like a life-changing sum of money, right? Or potential for a life-changing sum of money. Because that's kind of like what this is in team context, right? The team context of it is I have a chance to like really generationally make a huge difference for where it's going to go. You want to give yourself every percentage chance to make that happen, even though it might not happen or they might not be the guy. I mean, I feel like I have to asterisk every time because it's what every freaking dope out there says every time that I say this. Dopey people that don't understand numbers say this every time. Like, and it's just, you can tell it's wearing on me. Go ahead.
No, I think the money is a good way to present it, right? Like you'd always want to have the best percentage chance to get $1 million, like whatever it is. And I don't know why my brain insisted on being like, yeah, but I also got a decent percent chance to get like $700,000 or $600,000. But by the way, when you're in that pool,
that's true though. By the
way,
and
they go, no. But so here's the problem with this, as the Nets are currently constituted, to I think cement your analysis analogy. It's like best percentage chance at $1 million. Okay, fine, but I still have a really good percentage chance at 800, at 700, at 600, at 500, at 400, at 3. Like it is going like slow at a certain point, even $250,000. You go, well, is it really even worth it at this point? Because I had a chance at $1 million.
I mean, it's all good, and the thing is, it's all good. Like you're still going to get a better player, but maybe it's more like actually maybe this is the wrong way to look at it. But like traditionally, the number 1 picks in the draft are the best players. Yeah, okay. Another caveat. Yeah, not always. I get it. Okay, you don't need it. Just by and large, the best players in the top 50 come. Like if you look at the top 50 players in the league, the mode of that group is their
stock is the highest.
The mode of that group, the place where they've been picked the most is number 1. Okay.
Yep.
Like, and so it's almost, but it's so, under that context, it's almost like the Geiger counter where, going from a 6 to a 7 doesn't just mean one order of magnitude. It's like something like 100 orders of magnitude or something like that. Like the order of magnitude climbs significantly with each time you ratchet up like your chance to get a higher pick. Not an exactly great comp because you can have other guys that fall in the other ranges, but it's just like the percentage chance that it happens is considerably lower, even with the understanding that it can happen. So overall, it's just why these things end up do mattering. I think it's okay. So tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about D'Lo, about what we think the Nets can do. I'm already like pissed off about this idea, but so
talk about Cam Thomas and his return a little bit. We'll do a little bit of like, away from the court and going forward. Because by the way, that's a big, maybe its own episode as well. What happens to this team who's scrappy and fighting right now when they get back their best offensive player? That's a whole other conversation for the Brooklyn Nets down the stretch of this season as well. But hey,
what's happening?
Oh, dude, I'm sitting back and enjoying it. I got to pick between a banana and an apple this morning. Apparently, it could be seismic for my life journey.
Flip that coin, baby, and see what happens. All right, we're gonna be back again tomorrow. Make sure what do I say here? Yeah. You want to make sure you go over, subscribe to YouTube. You can see our faces. Appreciate friend of the show, Joe Martin over on Twitter, who been throwing up some clips. Good job by him. We're supposed to throw up the clips, didn't?
Yeah.
Joe's over there doing it. So
when you got dedicated fans like this, why? You know what I mean? We're
why bother?
Community. Yeah.
So be like Joe. Go over to YouTube, put some clips up on YouTube. Do the thing we're supposed to be doing on a daily basis that we never do.
You better believe it. And hey, friends, time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. And that is one Groucho Marx.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, banana. Basketball, yeah.